Hello, my friends. E4. Who was white? Not me. I don't play E4. So, I was black. And this game is crazy. It's the chessiest game of chess I've played. There is so much chess in this game. I'm just going to get started. E4, D6, Pirc, D4, grabbing the center, knight F6, bringing out the knight, just playing the Pirc. I don't know if I need to describe the Pirc every time, but the first 5 moves are usually the same no matter what. So as I don't grab the center, my opponent does. E4, D4, and then he goes knight C3. I go G6. Move 4, he goes knight F3, creating that nice shape, optimal center coverage. I go bishop G7, fianchet. He goes bishop C4, and I castle. He goes H3, so that I can't put my light square bishop over there and attack his knight. I can't stare at the knight this time. And I go A6. I'm going to take a bit longer this time because there's only 25 moves in this one. But we used all our time. It came down to a couple minutes each. So he goes bishop C4 for turn 5, and I castle because I'm just finishing my development. And he goes H3, and I go A6 to potentially push B5, which would attack his bishop. And he knows that, so he goes A4 to prevent me pushing B5. So I go C6, just send in the reinforcements. C6 is a very common thing to play in the Pirc, so I was comfortable doing that. He goes bishop E2, sensing danger, brings it back, getting ready to redeploy it. However, I'll say now that that bishop on that square, I mean, not that you can tell the future, but that ended up being a rough square. That bishop's sort of out of play for the rest. I don't know if that's a bad spoiler. Let's continue. So he goes turn 8, bishop E2. And I go knight B to D7. Developing a piece. And he pushes E5. And this is when things start to go nuts. I take on E5. D takes E5. And he takes D on E. D takes E5 for turn 10. And now, starting now, is a battle for that pawn. That single pawn, right? He's alone unless he starts pushing his king pawns. So, knight E8. Getting him out of the way of that pawn, you know. He's dangerous. You got to watch out. And I knew that putting my knight on the back rank is an idea in the Pirc so that you can push other things. I made sure that that knight had a spot to go. I played good chess today. And I think it's because I got a lot of sleep. I made sure to get sleep because everyone I've been talking to, or listening to rather, on podcasts or whatever, get your sleep. Get your sleep. If you want your brain to work, turn 11, bishop F4, protecting E5. And I go queen A5. And I should start learning my lesson about putting my queen on the edge like that. It's always so tempting. And I'm not saying that it ended up being bad, but it was something I had to work with the whole time. It's off to the side. And not only am I putting my queen off to the side, you know, it is creating a threat. Now I've got the numbers. I've got on that e5 pawn, I've got the queen on a5. I've got the bishop and on g7. And I've also got, now that I've also got the knight on d7. So three attackers on that pawn. And so, but now he's bringing his queen down, and his queen gets the center while mine's off to the side. So something to consider when you're going for an attack. You know how he's going to defend, and think about the position after that. But anyway, so I digress. Turn 12, queen d4 in response to my queen a5. And I go c5. Dangerous, dangerous. But pushes his queen. I get a little tempo. Oh, and also prevents him going b4. Attacking my queen with that pawn. Yeah. It wasn't a free, if, you know, it would seem like if he went b4, that I would be able to capture it, but it's not the case. I'm pretty sure he'd be able, my queen is so close to being trapped for the whole game. But in the end becomes useful. You'll see. So anyway, I go c5, and it's a nicely positioned pawn, I gotta say. And that was the other thing. You know, I can't get into everything that I'm thinking about for all these moves, but I'll give you the gist. So anyway, he goes queen e3, protecting the e5 pawn still, and I go knight c7. And he castles. Oh yeah, sorry, I wanted to explain my knight c7. I was just getting him off the back rank, getting him started. You get all your pieces, you find the pieces that are the least good, and you improve them. That's the idea of chess. And so he castles, and then I go knight e6. So he just went from e8 to c7 to e6. He went just up 2 squares. It took 2 moves, but now he's in a position. Now he's in a position to start causing problems. He is attacking the bishop on f4 in this position. Or not f4. Yeah. So he goes bishop g3, keeping him on the diagonal of the e5 pawn. I go rook d8 because it's going to be an open file at some point once I move my knight. And there's a play that I want to do with the knight on e6, going up to b or d4, being protected by the pawn on c5. Man, look at me say these things. Okay, so knight e6, bishop g3, rook d8. Oh yeah, I was explaining rook d8. Turn 16. Rook f to d1. He's contesting my takeover of that file. And then I think for about 20 or so minutes, I'm down on time a whole lot now because I could not figure out the best way to move forward since he took that file. It became very difficult. And I had to do a risky thing. The reason it took me 20 minutes because it looked like pushing my pawn to b6 was going to trap my queen. However, after much calculation and hemming and hawing about many different things, I needed to get my light square bishop off. He was pinned. He was stuck. Sure, he's protecting that knight, and he does do that for a while. Optimally, he does a good job there. But in the end, you need to connect your rooks. And that guy was in the way of that. So, we're more than halfway through the game already. Things are getting crazy. Things get crazy. I'm going to stop using that word. So I go b6. It's also protecting that pawn. It's not, in general, not a bad. It's just that it's really cramps. It disconnects my queen from the rook. So, many problems there. Anyway, so in the end, it seemed fine. So, turn 17. Bishop h4. Now, this, as you can see, is attacking my pawn on e7, my unmoved e pawn. Undefended, unmoved. And the one thing we didn't talk too much after the game. We're both frazzled. But I said, because he goes bishop h4 to attack my e7 pawn, but it would have been a stronger play to keep the bishop protecting that e5 pawn. And then instead using his knight on c3 to jump in to d5, I think was the available square, to then get to e7 that way. Yes. But anyway, he goes bishop h4, and I go knight d4. And if knight d4 doesn't get a double exclamation mark, I don't know, because that makes the whole thing come together. Just look at what it's doing, okay? It's threatening the pawn on c2, which is a fork of the rook and queen. I could also eat the light squared bishop with check if needed. It did something else. It did 100 different things. Knight to d4 was a crucial move, even though he gets to take back with the knight. Oh yeah, that's the thing. I'm also threatening his knight, which is one of the key defenders of e5. You see, I had a plan. I had a plan to attack a singular pawn, and that's what chess is all about. You make a plan. You go for the weaknesses. So he takes knight takes d4. And I take back. C takes d4. And he takes back with the rook. Rook takes d4. Turn 19. And I get to take now that pawn on e5 does not have the correct number of defenders. I go bishop takes e5. It's mine now. He can't take with the queen because since I had taken with the pawn, I'm sacrificing that c pawn. But now the vision of my queen comes back. It's unblocked. Crazy game. Crazy, crazy game. To try and come up with all this stuff. Where am I? Bishop takes e5. And he goes rook e4. He has to get out of the way of the attack of my bishop. He can't take the bishop, so he's got to move. So I'm sorry. Rook e4, and I go bishop b7. I finally get to connect. I get my light square bishop since he left that file, which honestly I thought it would have been better for him to go rook instead of rook e4. I thought he was going to go rook d5, threatening my queen. But if he had done that, I did have a plan for if he went rook d5. If he was going to go rook d5, I was going to push my queen up to b4, just just over one diagonal square. And then the series of trades, since I could then capture his bishop on h4, because like putting the rook on d5 is a double attack on the bishop and the queen, so I'd have to leave the defense of my bishop on e5, which then he could then take with the rook, and then I capture back with the knight, and he could capture back with the queen, but then I could capture back with the bishop. So maybe he saw that, and that's why he didn't do it. So he went rook e4, and I go bishop b7, attacking that rook, putting him on the diagonal that he wants. So it's attacking, it's connecting the rooks. I'm still, my e7 pawn is hanging, but there's no time for that because I keep the pressure. He goes rook g4, and I make a bit of a mistake here. I continue to harass that rook. I go knight f6, which is incorrect because he can go rook g5, which now is attacking my bishop. Now he's got a double attack on my bishop again. I've only got one defender, which is the queen. I can't move that bishop because then his rook eats my queen. So I had no choice but to retreat my knight back to where he was. He goes back knight to d7. And then he goes f4. Because, you know why. Because I can't move the bishop because the rook's going to eat my queen. However, I had a resource, which was f6. On turn 23, he went f4 and I went f6, attacking his rook. So if he eats my bishop with that pawn, or the rook, I'm eating the rook. So then the attack on my queen is gone, and it's a good trade for me. So then he goes rook g3. And I'm safe. Now that he's taken him off that line of my queen, I get to move my bishop to safety. Bishop d6. And it protects the pawn. It protects my e7 pawn. And there's no double attack on it because I had pushed f6. So now the bishop can't see it. And only the queen could. So I protected it and also set up a wonderful... I started to pray. That he would not see my next move. And he was down to a couple minutes on his clock, and he told me after that he had many things to think about. It basically came down to a wrong move order. He did sort of see the danger at one point, but then maybe he goes rook g4. And do you guys see how I closed the game? Bishop c5. Bishop c5 pins the queen to the king. He's going to lose his queen. And that's it. All that. 3 hours of work. And it comes down to a blunder. The game was close the whole time. It was a crazy skirmish for the center. And I managed to not mess anything up. And that's all. That's what chess is all about. If you want to win, you have to not mess up. You have to know a lot. You have to practice a lot, obviously. And that's all just so that you don't mess up. You have to have enough sleep. I don't know what else to say. I get all preachy when I win a game. Even though the only reason I won is because my friend was short on time. Shorter than me. I still had time. At first, I was down a time by almost a half hour, but then as things started to get crazy, he ended up being down on time by like 10 minutes. So, I'm exhausted. That was a crazy game. I won one. So the tournament's over. I got 3 out of 6. He had 4 out of 6. He was gonna win. He was gonna win with 5 points out of 6 but I managed to keep him down to 4 points. Me and one other guy have 3 points in the tournament, and that's, wow. So he's a strong opponent, and he played super well. But I managed to keep everything safe somehow, and keep pressure. You got to keep the pressure. If I had tried to defend with there was just so many lines to calculate. If he had decided to take my pawn on e7, when I went bishop, when I got my light square bishop onto the
Caribou track out
onto b7. Once I, connected my rooks, I thought he was going to take that pawn because it would be threatening my rook. And if I had tried to just move my rook, then it wouldn't work, because he could then move his bishop to attack my bishop, and I couldn't eat his bishop with my bishop, because then his rook and queen would come down. He created a battery when he put his rook on e3. Man, the pressure in this game, I can't tell you. There was so much chess happening. I was constant thinking the whole time. And just to the guy who coughed every 10 seconds, there's like 30 games of chess happening. The room would have been silent if not for this one gentleman coughing every 10 seconds minimum. If he was my opponent, I would have talked to the director, because that's unreal. I mean, what can you do, right? But everyone's tactics, everyone's chess is brought down like 20%. It was so distracting. The room, it's an opera house room. It was a giant hall. We were in a different room today, a big fancy room. And his cough just all the whole time. I couldn't, oh my God. How can you do that to everyone around you? Get a cough drop. Leave. Forfeit your game. Apparently it really upset me. When you're trying your hardest to concentrate. And everyone is. And this guy just relentless. Mercy. What can you do? You gotta cough. Cougher's gonna cough. You gotta keep playing. That's all. You 12 moves deep down the line, and all of a sudden, I was like, okay, wait, where was I? Okay, back to square one. Okay, that's enough. No, I don't want to be angry. I won my game. I'm happy. I'm relieved. And everything's great. So, go chess. Have a good night. I need to go home and sleep.